The following question is about projectile motion. You start off with initial height of 20 meters. You shoot a cannon at 20 meters per second at 30 degrees. And you want to find the maximum height, the distance traveled, and the time elapsed. So if we want to find the max height, we have to note one thing. At the maximum height, the velocity in the y direction is 0. So we can call this our final velocity if we make our initial velocity the velocity we start off when you shoot. And if you want to find the initial y velocity, well, you have 20 meters per second times sine of 30 degrees. That gives you the y component. And that's actually equal to 10 meters per second. So that's our initial y velocity. Our final y velocity is 0. And we know what gravity is. It's negative 9.8. So we can use this equation plus 2AD, where A is the gravity, this is our initial velocity, final velocity, and D is represented by our final height minus our initial height. Final height is the maximum height we were looking for. Initial height, this is at the 20 meters that we start off with. So what we get is 0 is equal to 100, because 10 squared is 100, plus, and then 2 times A is negative 19.6. So we get minus 19.6. And we get final height minus initial height, which is 20 meters. If we move 100 over here, divide by negative 19.6 and add 20, we get a maximum height of 25.1 meters. Now let's do for time elapsed. Right here, time. And so we can note one thing. We can look at the projectile motion and look at the position time graph of the cannonball. And the position time graph is, let's call it y. So we have y is equal to y initial plus the velocity times the time. We'll call this vy. And then plus 1/2 at squared, where a is the negative 9.8 for gravity. So if we set y equal to 0, which is the position we're trying to look for, we have an equation. We get 0 is equal to 20 plus Vy times t, so 10t minus 4.9t squared. Now, this is a quadratic equation, so you can use the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, what does that mean? What do the answers mean? Well, you'll solve for an answer for time. You'll get a time, and you'll get a positive time and a negative time. And so this right here will be our positive time that we will solve for. And if we went backwards, almost as if the ball it was shot up from the beginning on the ground instead of on initial height, this would be our negative time. So we want to solve for our positive time. So if this is your B right here, this is your C, and this is your A, if you solve for the positive time, you end up getting t is equal to 3.28 seconds. That means that the ball's in the air for 3.28 seconds. Now, if we solve for the distance that it's traveled, well, we know that the velocity in the x direction is constant the entire time. So we could say that the distance is equal to v initial x, which is going to stay constant the entire time, times the time that it's in the air. So this will be our 20 meters per second times the x component of the velocity, which is cosine of 30. And this will be our 3.28 seconds that we solve for. So what we would end up getting is x, or d rather, is equal to 56.9 meters. So this is the distance that's traveled by the cannonball. The time, like I said before, is the time that's in the air. And the height max is the maximum height achieved by the cannonball. And so 25.1 meters, not above the initial starting point, but total. So this whole thing is 25.1. This is 56.9, and the time elapsed is 3.28 seconds. So that is projectile motion.